So, time for a button. Just like a card, a button is a default UI element which we're going to use in different parts of the application. Therefore here I'll add a Button.js file, and I already mentioned it, attached you find a Button.module.css file, which I'll again download and drag and drop into that UI folder next to the Button.js file. Now inside of the Button.js file, we can import React from React because we're going to write some JSX code. We can import classes from /button.module.css already. And we can then define our button constant, which is our functional component, and export this as a default. And now in here, I simply want to return the built-in button component, but of course with my default styling applied and with some configuration options. To start with the styling, I'll add class name and point at classes.button. Because in the Button.module.css file you'll find that button class, so we can use it thanks to CSS modules to apply a little styling here. I also want to make sure that the type of the button can be set, and I want to make sure it can be set from outside, so from the place where we use our custom button component. Therefore, the value assigned to the type prop on the built-in button component will be dynamic, and I will simply access props.type here, but also provide a fallback in case that should not be set with the OR operator. The alternative is button. So if props type is undefined, this button value will be used as a fallback type for the built-in button. Now, in addition, I'll add onClick, and here I expect to get a handler function via props on my own button component, so I'll simply forward this to props onClick. Now that name here is totally up to you. You don't have to name it onClick, but again, I want to make my own button basically usable like the built-in button, and therefore I use the same naming. So I will have an onClick prop on my button component, and any function received there is just passed on to the built-in button component through its onClick prop. And last but not least here, I also want to be able to output some content between the button tags, and I expect to get that content between the tags of my own button, and therefore we use the special children prop here. That should be all. Now we can go to Add User, where we have a button, and use our own custom button. And hopefully I can now just replace built-in button, which is lowercase, with my custom button, which starts with a capital B, per the convention that your components should always start with capital characters. And we now just need to import it, because as I mentioned, you need to import all things you want to use from other files. So here I'll import button from, going up one level, UI, button, like this. And if we now save that, we got this nicer looking button which should work just like the built-in button, because in the end it just wraps the built-in button, of course. But that's the idea behind all React components. In the end, you always compose them all from the built-in HTML components, but you structure them in a certain way and maybe attach certain logic so that you have your own components. And with that, that looks quite well. Now let's make sure we actually fetch user input, and we then kind of start rendering a list of users below that input form here.